Welcome to Resource Thursday with Pia. I'm your host, Paco Lebron. This is the place to learn how to run your IT service business, whether you're a one-person shop or leading a team for the journey. This is the place for you. Let me go ahead and introduce my co-host. We have none other than Mr. Rick Smith over at Renactus Technology. Rick, how the heck are you, my friend?
I'm actually doing great. Any better, and I think it'd be a sin. Doing real good.
I hear that, my friend. I hear that. I am super excited to talk to this next guest that we have coming on here. I will go ahead and mention his name after our quick little ad. One of my good friends. We hit it off once we met. Probably about, I think it was last year that we met for the first time. Felt like I've known him for a lifetime. Rocking obviously his company's shirt because that's how much love I have for the man. We'll go ahead and introduce him here shortly. But before we go into that, I want to talk about one of my other favorite things. I think that's your favorite thing too, Rick.
My favorite thing.
And that is TechCon Unplugged. TechCon Unplugged will be in Woodbridge, New Jersey, September 7th through the 10th at the Delta Hotels Woodbridge. Join us for an evening mixer as we kick off 2.5 days of content to help better your business, to save money, save time, but most importantly, improve your services. This show is for any size IT solution provider, as mentioned in the intro of this show, whether you're an emerging MSP or you're a veteran in the space. This is the place for you. Tickets are on sale now for early bird pricing at $199. Again, that is until March 31st. So get your tickets now over at techconunplugged.com. Rick, anything you want to add on to that before we go into?
Just looking forward to seeing everybody there. Things are coming along. We will be getting some content out on the website shortly. But again, we encourage you, get your tickets early, get the early bird special because tickets are moving pretty well.
Yeah, no, we're definitely
seeing everybody there. I'm sorry.
It's amazing because I think we've talked in the past where we really had a very big East Coast presence, and it's showing now that we've moved the show East Coast. We're getting a lot more ticket purchasers early on as we had thought. You know, there's a chance the show may actually sold out. So it's going to be a good time as we have over all those MSPs, all those IT solution providers, as we network with both them and our vendor partners and peers as we kind of make and bridge that ecosystem together. So with that being said, I want to go ahead and bring on one of my good friends, very prominent figure in the channel recently. He's been making headway with the company Pia. Let me go ahead and introduce Tim Coach, Global Channel Chief over at Pia. Tim, how the heck are you, my friend?
Man, I am great. Thanks, Paco, for that introduction. I'm like looking around my room, like who's this guy, right? So thanks to you and Rick for having me on, man. I like we've been trying to do this for a hot minute. It just schedules haven't matched up, so I can't tell you how great it is to be on your show finally.
Yeah, no, I'm super stoked because, you know, for anyone who knows you, and we'll kind of go into your intro on how you kind of came into the channel and then made your way over at Pia. When we met last year, I think it was one of the most insightful conversations where I just thought to myself, man, this is one of the smartest dudes I ever talked to in my life. You asked several couple questions about my business just to know more about me because you were heading up a lot of the partner alliances at that time just to get understanding of all the partners that were joining of that previous company. And it was just like, hey, look, I think you got this going on. I know you're struggling with this, but if you do A, B, and C, I think you're going to hit it out of the park. I was like, shit, that's I never thought of it that way. And sure, you know, dollars to donuts, I started implementing those couple things you mentioned. And now we're just like, it's crazy. And obviously that's your experience. And so I even had a buddy of mine, I and Andres Quiros over at Green Ink went out to Bona Beef just to, hey, let's take you to something a little more Chicago versus the commercial. And we were having this conversation, and Andres has a completely different IT support business. And you kind of just were hearing what he said, and you're like, hey, I think if you did this, this, and this, you'd be that. And you can't imagine the wheels going off in this man. He's been doing it for 30 years, kind of just figuring it out. And it was just so impactful. So just conversating with you is always a pleasure, my friend. Rick met you last year as well. But enough of the whole man crush. Why don't we go ahead and talk about how you kind of came into the space and how you landed over at Pia?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for the very kind words, man. It's I think one of the things I love most about our industry is our willingness to help, right? So it's you know, you go through all these different things, and we go through all these different trainings and things like this. And back in the day, even though I'm an ops guy, you know, I went through Sandler training, and you know, you get more into people, right? I learned in the military, you know, it's like you attract more, what is it? You attract more bees with honey than you do with vinegar, right? So having that kind of that crass exterior doesn't really work. So if you find out more about people and what they're trying to do, right, maybe you have 2 cents that can help out, right? And this industry is all about helping each other out. And that's, I think, why I'm personally so passionate about it is I can walk in anywhere. I can call anybody. I could call you up. I could call Rick up and say, hey, I need some help. And you guys will have no clue what I'm talking about, but you're always willing to listen and to provide that, right? I mean, that's what our industry is. It's helping each other.
Yep. Absolutely.
So just to get into my personal background, right? So basically I was in the military for a long time, jumped out of the military, did some other things. And then I finally decided to go to college and went to college to be a technical person. And then, you know, on to get an MBA in business, just so I can understand, kind of have a better full scope of an education. Right. And I always tell people my sister's smart. I'm educated. Mine's way more expensive. Right. But with that, like I landed a job. But I've landed like these great jobs that have crazy tech. Like my internship was at a Harley Davidson plant, like in a manufacturing plant. Right. So I started out on like fiber and Cisco backbones. And, you know, like it's like insane kind of a way to start an internship out. Right. And then from there, I progressed over to another company once I graduated where I was the client. I was the client for almost a decade. I've fired as many MSPs as I've hired. And, you know, it just kind of went down that road as when you're the client. And then what's funny about it is the first MSP that I really worked with, I fired them because they just weren't doing a good job. Like they just weren't completing the task I needed them to complete for such a high-end system that I was working with. And the reason why we use MSPs as clients is because our bench isn't that deep. I don't have the talent. Like I had Citrix farms and VM farms and synchronous SANs across geographic distance. I didn't have the talent to manage that. Right. Or, well, let me phrase it. I didn't have the talent to install that. I had the talent to manage it, but you go to an MSP because they have that bench. They have that depth of knowledge in all these different areas where they can come in and do that. Right. So it's like, oh my God, like I've got, even though I'm working for this large company, I have an entire IT department sitting behind me with this MSP I'm working with. So fast forward a little bit, years later, and I'm having lunch with the owner of the MSP that I fired. And just through conversation, he's like, why don't you come over and run our help desk? And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, I don't really know if I'm about that. And I was like, but I'm always interested in that next step. And it just seemed like a progression in the next step. So I jumped over as his help desk manager. And then through the years had worked myself up to a COO. Now, there were several renditions that happened during that time. One, I had a large clientele of banking. So security is primo, right? Like I'm doing audits and exams every week, right? And it's one of those things where we had to get better. So for that first MSP, right, we took that MSP within, I think it was a couple, maybe 2-3 years, from roughly 88,000 MRR to 350,000 MRR. Overall, it was roughly a $7.5 to $10 million company with everything we did as that MSP. I met a partner there. He's a friend of mine, might as well be family. And then we decided we liked it so much that we decided to go out and just do this for others, right? Like at one point we had a stipulation in our contract that you had to be $1 million in debt for us to even consider taking you on, right? Because that's like, that was the fun part. The fun was getting someone out of debt and then moving forward. So we did that.
Because I wanted to make sure I heard that correctly. You said $1 million in debt for you to be able to take them on. Okay.
Yeah, that was a stipulation because what we could do is that we found that we could really help turn them around quicker, and we could help, quite honestly, and the investors and the owners get back. Because I've always stated, you know, people, when you look at the EOS model, right, if you're familiar with that, people always talk about visionaries and this and that. And I get ranked in several different places, but I always say that I personally love bringing someone's vision to reality. That's what I love to do. And I hate to see someone that's spent so many years trying to build their business and they haven't quite got over the hump because no one's willing to share with them whatever the secret sauce is. Well,
Right.
I have everybody for dinner. I don't care who you are. Come over, let's fix dinner, and I'll give you the recipe. That's just who I am. But some of them just needed some tweaks, right? And we didn't stay with them that long, or we consulted with them on the side. So I spent about a decade doing that. And what happens is, as you guys know, is eventually you build those relationships with your vendors good enough that they're like, hey, why don't you come out on the road and talk about our product or talk about what this does for you?
Right.
So did that. And then I was like, I got bored again, right? That's what happens. About every decade, I get bored. And I got bored and I'm like, man, I ought to see if I could actually do this channel thing, right?
Sure.
So, of course, I started picking up the phone and, I'm not going to sit here and drop names, but we all have good friends in the industry. And I started contacting them. Hey, can I actually do this, or am I just full of myself? Right. And they're all like, no, you got to go. So I jumped over to my last company. I was there for 9 months and I met these guys, Pia, in Vegas last year at Connect IT. And like they're talking to me about their product. And I'm like, there's no way you guys are full of it that this thing actually works. Because as MSPs, right, we all talk about we're going to take all this data we've generated and do something with it. And we never do because we don't have time. We're too busy. I heard, the CEO of the company yesterday talk about how MSPs tend to be more firefighters, right? Because we're constantly reacting to what's going on with our clients, whereas we want to be more proactive, right?
Right.
So it was like, I didn't really kind of believe that the product actually did what it did. So finally it came down to getting my business partner for a decade, who's a God level engineer, on the phone with this company. And so, like, I was just like, it's up to him. Like, if he says you're good, I'm there. If he says you're not, I'm out. There's no gray. Right.
Nice.
And like the whole time, like he's demoing the product, he's just blowing me up on the phone, right? He's like, oh man, have you seen the back end of this? Have you seen the tech? Have you seen how they've integrated this? Have you seen the simplistic nature of this? Right. And he's like, it's all built out. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So him and I had a conversation. Obviously, I ended up here as I'm branded. And then shortly thereafter, I was at his house in his pool and we were talking. He was like, dude, I quit my job. I was like, what are you doing? And he's like, I don't know. And I'm like, well, I need a VP of sales. You want to come over to the channel of technical sales, right? Because he's technical. And he's like, sure, I'd love to do that. So nice. I brought Joe Spiller over with me. So we're back together again. And the reality of it, this product is just the tech. Not only is the product amazing, the technology behind the product is really kind of like the most amazing piece of that. And that's when you get into the channel, like you'll find as a speaker, right? Like the money's there. Like people will come into you, like I get offers, pretty regularly, right?
Sure.
But it's like, you got to find something that you're passionate about. You got to find something that you want to get in. Well, for me, it's really two things. One, I got to be passionate about the tech because my base is tech. Like, even though engineers now laugh at me when I call myself that I used to be an engineer and technical person, right? That's where my basis is. So I also understand it, which means I can call BS when they're full of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing is at this point in my career, I didn't want to sell through a product. I don't want to come to you, Paco. I don't want to come to you, Rick, and say, hey, here's my widget. I want you to sell it through. Because when you do that, what I should be doing as a vendor is then teaching you how to sell through, helping you how to sell through. Hey, my product is $5. You want to make $2.50 per license. Here's how I should help you go out and sell it to your clients. But it seems like as vendors, we always fall short of that last step. We always fall short of, let me help you, show you how to sell it to your clients so it makes sense to them, right?
Yeah.
So the two companies I've worked for at this point, both of them are specifically built for the MSP to help the MSP do their everyday work, to help them be better, to show more profitability on the bottom line, to make work quicker, to put that time back, things like that. So that's what I loved about coming to PIA is, one, the tech is insanely crazy, even though it seems simplistic on the front end. And two, You can't resell this. Now, we could have a side conversation where I could show you how to do that in a co-managed environment, but it's not for your end users. It's for you. So that's the reason why I ended up at PIA the way I did.
Very cool. Very cool. Now, Rick, obviously we talked a little bit about passion. We talked a little bit about really what drives you. I think, just trying to translate that over to when you joined over on MSP Unplugged, right? And really trying to dive into that. What Tim just mentioned, obviously you have this basis, you have this ability to help, obviously with the product of PIA having the ability to do so. What has been your experience on just the ability of this channel trying to help? What has that resonated with you so far, kind of going on this past year and a half of us trying to truck along and figure this thing out?
Well, I'll tell you what, it has ignited a passion in me. You always say, hey, I'll help out. I'm willing to do whatever I can to help somebody out. Like Tim said, you can pick up the phone and call someone and know they'll be willing to step out and help you, or at least listen through to your problems, right? Yeah. My passion comes from, and I say this probably every show, but I grew up in this community. My business, grew up in this community. I learned how to run my IT business a lot better through this community. So that's where that passion comes from. And it's the same thing like Tim saying, it's not necessarily about something you can sell through to your clients. It's more so to help you. So my passion here is being able to give the things that I've learned and back to the community. So I think it's the same drive. And I'm really, I really heard when Tim said that, it really perked me up, because I'm thinking about it. It's like, hey, he's not thinking about, hey, you could sell this through, or this is how you make money selling this. Is more so, this is how you're going to help yourself improve whatever your services or whatever you're doing. And it goes back to, and I think about too, that is true. The last two companies I know you to be associated with are the same thing. So that's very interesting.
No, that makes total sense. Now, Tim, obviously we've talked about, the overall of PIA, the great technology about it. But, I, along with others, they're probably wondering, what the heck is PIA?
Yeah.
And what does PIA do for the IT solution provider, the MSP? And does it help, what maybe is PIA an abbreviation of, it helps MSPs with that pain in the aspirin of things that are going on in their business? I want to talk a little bit more about PIA and really what is the function of what the business is trying to do in the space.
Yeah. So first off, let's rip through the acronym real quick. It's Predictive Intelligent Agent is what it actually stands for. Although if you go on Discord, it's a whole different thing, right? So you have to watch that. So so let's talk about what PIA actually does. So before we started recording, we were talking about understanding the weaknesses in ourselves as leaders, as setting in essential positions within our companies. And for me, it's always been extremely crucial to know what I'm not good at and to hire around that, right? Because then that shores up the team. So let's talk about what it comes to being an MSP. The majority of what we do as an MSP is help desk. Let's help desk, service desk. That's what we do, right? It's a very reactive environment. It's a very labor intensive environment. And if it's labor intensive, then it's obviously directly affecting your profitability, because labor is our biggest cost against our profitability, right? We have to pay for people. And a lot of times, until we hit those maturity levels, we're just throwing people at problems, right? I'll hire somebody else. I'll hire somebody new. Well, now we're in an issue where there's nobody out there. And then having a technical asset is even worse trying to find, or it's even more expensive. So your cost goes higher. So as we look at that statement about finding what we're not really good at, quite honestly, it's automation of our service desk. It's stop being reactive. We talk about you should be proactive. The reality of it is most MSPs don't have enough time, or not at a maturity level where they just have people sitting around that think up ways to be proactive. They don't have the think tank. So Rick, we were talking about your daughter a little bit earlier, and it's like they just don't have the time to have a think tank and just create things, right? So what happened and where PIA came from is one of the largest MSPs in Australia, right? They went into this growth mode. And then it accelerated past what they thought it was going to accelerate. And what they found was we're really struggling on help desk of getting these new companies we've acquired, getting them settled down, getting them involved. And part of what they came to is we have to get our staff involved on their tickets a lot faster. Right. So based off of that, they came up with the ratio of like, we want to be able to automate this. They seen, what I call automation. It's actually what we do is more of a manual representation of automation. And we do that through workflows, right? Tons of and, if, or statements if you're an old SQL person.
Yep.
Right. So, but it's constant triggers. But we build that out very manually, and then we turn around and we have to manage that very manually if it works. Right. So they set out on a mission to build out an entire thing that actually automates, right, the service desk portion of it, or at least the majority of it. So it took them about 3 years to build this thing out, right? And then once they got it built out for 3 years, they then started using it internally for 2 years, right? So like the guy that owns the place, or the main guy that owns the place, he tells you like his number one guy is his brother. His brother's a plumber. His brother's like, I'm tired of being a plumber. And, my boss is like, well, come on over and let's see about this. Well, now that guy cranks out tickets, because what the product actually does is it allows you to use what we call a tier 0, meaning people with no technical knowledge, to really resolve service desk tickets. The way they do that is it's all built in the background in a SaaS platform, and they literally follow the next click. So if you remember installing Windows 2000, like the 24 next clicks, right? People are like, oh, you got an intern installing Windows 2000 server. He's hitting next clicks. Like there's nothing intuitive about what they're doing. It's just time.
Yeah.
So what they did is they built out a solution, and we launched it in what we call engineer assist mode. And the entire resolution to the ticket is already there, right? It's done in PowerShell. We run on a Windows background. There's like that part of it is fairly open, right? But it's, you should do this next. You should do this, approve, right? The idea is that the technician themselves is never leaving their PSA, right? So when I say, we used to talk about single pane of glass all the time, right? There's never been a single pane of glass. Let's be honest about it.
Yep.
Now, with that being said,
a single pane in the
right. But Pia is the closest thing I've ever seen. And why is that? It's because I get a ticket in. I don't care how that ticket comes in, as long as it feeds into the PSA.
Yeah.
Our machine learning actually reads the description of the ticket to determine what the ticket's about. And then based off that, the AI launches the resolution package to complete the ticket. So normally, how would you do that? Like we can talk about, one of the things we talk about that we love that it really does is new user onboarding. Now that takes anywhere from an hour to 3 hours, depending on how complex this is, right?
Sure.
We do it in an average of 12 minutes or less, and it doesn't matter who's doing the next clicks, period. It just doesn't matter. And it's because we have all these API backend hooks in, right, that go into all these systems. So you're not going out and acquiring the license, giving who your purchasing agent is, right? We have hooks to do that. You're not going into your document management software, so you're not logging into that. You're not logging into your 365 instance. You're not logging into your servers. You're not doing any of that. It's literally doing it from the PSA ticket itself through the complete resolution of it. And that's one of the ways that we focus on security. So we all know, right? Like our industry changes, and we have to be able to tell our clients and be honest with ourselves as like, hey, we've outgrown this. We outgrew RDP. We obviously started shutting down remote ports, right? Then the answer was, let's open up a port-to-port firewall rule that allows this to happen. But the reality of what we're doing is we're creating a security issue because we're opening the firewall. Now, that was certainly, and it's still somewhat to this level, an acceptable practice. But it's like, how do we move past that? The way we've done it is through the API hooks.
Yeah.
So literally what happens is a person gets fed tickets, the machine learning reads it, it pops up the resolution, and then the technician goes through and clicks next. Now, I talk about, the person sitting at your front desk, they could do this. Right. We talk about, really, it doesn't matter. My techs would never let me work, and they would get irritated when I did tickets. But like, if I'm an owner and we've got a heavy ticket day and the staff needs help, I can go through and do that. Now, think about this. If I'm using a lower technical or a no technical asset to beat through the everyday random, the same generated tickets over and over and over a day, now what I can do is I can take those technical assets. I can take those people that I've got time and money invested in and training, and I can refocus them on more important tasks. And then I can turn around and teach them how to be in relationships, how to actually give a QBR that's not reading reports that we've already printed off and the client has.
Right.
We talk about we need a seat at the table, but nobody has time to have a seat at the table. Well, if I'm doing 50% of your daily workload on service desk, now I've done a couple of things. One, I freed up your staff so they can focus on your clients. They can focus on relationship building. They can focus on moving themselves to their next tier, right? I've now made your contracts. Now, we can talk about your company being profitable, but now I'm making your individual contracts profitable because I'm removing that labor cost off of the contract. Right. So when you come down to what PIA does, we found an issue that we've just always done it the same way, not necessarily good at it, but we just throw people at help desk. So we looked at that, created a solution, and now we've launched that as of July 27th to the industry as a whole to utilize. So we talk about the best products come from MSPs. Well, when you've got a couple hundred employees and you're at 9 figures and you've done that in about 7.5 years, you obviously know the pain of being an MSP and what it takes to develop a product that's really utilized for them. And I would say the other difference is I always talk about true automation. True automation is when we're done onboarding, we have about 60 packages now. I could get into a bigger number of like 200 if you do all the integrations and everything like that. But those are available day one out of the gate. As soon as onboarding's done, those are available. So you immediately start seeing it. You immediately start seeing those 60 packages available to you to utilize the day after you're onboarded. So you're not building an individual thing out for this company and then an individual ticket out for that company. It's, hey, here's 60. They work across the board. Let's go.
Nice. So lots to unpack there.
Yeah.
I actually just ran over to the integrations website as well. I mean, there's quite a few things that you've talked about, right? And what you've really mentioned is, and the thing that I took away that seems to be a big positive, at least me applying it to if we were to implement it, is it's really augmenting the abilities of any of the staff members here at any MSP, whether that is with no technical knowledge, with technical knowledge, etc. But you also had mentioned, you really drove in, and what I want to highlight is you've helped alleviate the burden rate. And specifically the burden rate of, and that's a term used that I got from Chris Tim when I was reading his PSA Impact. I'm sure that's a very specific term in the industry, but the burden rate of the fact of wasted burden rate or wasted time when, my office coordinator has to purchase the license, then assigns it to the tech to assign the license, then to get the user set up, and the back and forth because permissions weren't given because, one person has their role, another person has this role. Again, going through that 1 to 3 hours on onboarding a user down to 12 minutes, right? Like that's a huge burden rate to resolve. But you also mentioned on obviously how pain points of a managed service provider, an IT solution provider would go kind of getting to that high revenue number that they're trying to maintain and scale. I would even say that even those that are emerging and trying to figure out, okay, what's the most efficient way for me to do this? Because I may not have all the resources available in payroll, or I am a one-man shop, but they have, a part-time VA, or they may have their wife or a sibling that might be helping them out with the business. And now you've just augmented them with a huge superpower, in my opinion, to allow them to actually continue a repeatable, scalable process with what you've mentioned, true automation, versus what automation that's kind of been thrown around in the industry that is predictable. And I think that's a huge piece to really highlight.
Yeah, so check this out. This will tell you the insanity of what we're working with now, right? Because AI, machine learning, like this is all coming. Like I feel like we're going to see a big wave this year, but
Yeah,
we got to figure out a way to take labor out of the equation. If I'm taking labor off the help desk and I'm just throwing it over on the tier 3s to manage something in the background, I've not accomplished anything. I've just switched around where my cost is, right? So
Yeah.
to hit your point, that I'm working with somebody now. It's a brand new MSP. They're growing, right? They're doing the things. But I talked to this lady and her husband, and we're just like talking about the product. We're talking about her growing her MSP. And then the husband's like, man, I just really want to help her. And I'm like, well, what do you do? And he's like, I'm a farmer. Right. So he's like, I literally sat in a tractor all day. Right.
Nice.
So the crazy thing about this is, and we all, this also relates to the conversation we always have about, should a dispatcher be technical or non-technical, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where do they sit? So with the PIA product, the way that this gentleman, the farmer, can help her is, if you don't know, most tractors now are GPS driven, right? Like you go measure the field and then the tractor kind of does its own thing and the person just sitting in there to turn it. That's pretty much it. But so what we can do is I can give that man a laptop as long as he's got an internet connection, and he can sit in his tractor, and every ticket that comes in for her, he can do those tickets till the point where the PIA software is like, hey, this is a little bit scaled. You need to escalate this. Right? So now what this gentleman's able to do is sit in his tractor and do tickets, because it takes no technical knowledge to do them, and then pass off the more critical stuff to her. How insane is that, right? So dispatcher, technical, non-technical. If I'm getting tickets in and the dispatcher is non-technical and they're running through all the tickets that PIA can do, next, click, finish, and then offloading the harder tickets or the more technical tickets to the other staff members, think about how much your efficiency rate just goes through the roof.
I'm just thinking for Rick, he can put all those kids to work.
I thought about that.
But, so I think this is all great information, right? And I think this is really cool they're onto something. And I just went on the integration side. You're integrated into Microsoft. You're integrated to a few ticketing systems, such as Autotask, I believe I saw, ServiceNow, ConnectWise, I believe.
Yeah, ConnectWise, ServiceNow. And we have some other stuff in that. Like, it's like one of those things is like, here's what I talk about. The other thing that's important, I threw it up in the chat, is the automations, right? Because when I speak, everybody's like, okay, but what's it going to actually do? And how do I compare that to my tickets? So in the chat, I threw in the link there to our automations page, and that lists everything we do. And that's a live list, right? Because every time I do a presentation, it's out of date. We have 60, 70 developers on staff. We got we're just under 100 employees. And literally all they do, it's a lot of what they do, is the integral piece of creating new automations. We put out new automations every 2 weeks, right? Like and these are all included in the stack, right? Like these just come in and it's like, oh, one day I can fix this or fix that. But one of the things I always talk about doing this is like, run over the website, hit, let's do a demo, right? And then with that being said, let's go through what it actually takes. This is our demo site I'm throwing up there, but let's go through the technical aspect. And when I say technical, I want you to bring your most technical people to the conversation. So the staff in the US is built out solely of what I call recovering MSPs. It's people that spent years in our space and they want to help a bigger audience. So we have conversations on the demo level, and these are people that have owned businesses. These are people that have consulted with businesses, CIOs that are now just on the channel development management, on the channel development side. And like, we have those conversations across the board and everything. So when you do a demo and you really get into the technical aspect of it, the conversation's done.
Yeah.
Right. Because I hate the traditional sales model. Let's get a salesperson involved. And we do a lot of talking. And it's like, oh my God, can I just get
on
to
the next
point?
call? We got to go to the
right. So we start out with the technical demo, because technically, if it can't happen, what's the point of moving on?
Right.
Right. So we start out with a technical demo. So then the sales part of it just becomes the minutia of running through the process to get onboarded. Right now, onboarding takes about 90 days. And the reason why that is we touch, and when I say we, I mean Pia. Like, we're there helping you. This isn't here, you got homework, go figure your crap out on your own. That's horrible. Like, once again, we come from an MSP, so we understand the pain of onboarding when a vendor just gives us some crap that we have to figure out on our own, right? So we actually hold the MSP's hand through the entire process. We help them. They have champions. They have project managers. And we touch every one of your clients. And the reason why we do that is because we want that result to be the same. I always say it doesn't matter if I'm doing the ticket or your mom's doing the ticket or the smartest person you know is doing the ticket. I need the same outcome every time. That's the reason why our onboarding is so intensive, is because we want you to have those 60 packages day one, not a year from now, day one.
Right. Yeah. Definitely all great points. Obviously, we put those 2 links up there. We'll make sure we have them in the show notes as well. Tim, one last question for you before we kind of like round out the show here is, I'm sure you've heard, throughout a lot of the media outlets and things that this whole, AI automation is a concern, not only just on a, Skynet's taking over, but really specifically of, security. And I think there's a lot of concern of it being smart enough to do a lot of these things, if exposed, could really be a bad day. What is PIA kind of doing to ensure that their platform is kind of, dotting the I's, crossing the T's, making sure that it is, as secure as possible?
100%. So we're going to take that a step further. So we use an agent. We tried to work with the RMMs, but they're just too slow. I mean, nothing against any of them. We love them all, but they're not fast enough for us. So we use an agent. So we had to take our security to the next level, right? So we're GDPR compliant. We're ISO compliant. We're SOC compliant. I'm expecting HIPAA to drop any day. And then on top of all that, because if you understand how compliances work, if you're GDPR, then you're more than likely you've hit all the SOC boxes, right? So, and GDPR tends to be a little bit ahead of North America when it comes to security. So we've done all that. And then the importance of always use the phrase, using the prisoners checking the bars, that should never happen. So I can say I'm a secure all day. The person you want to be afraid of is the person that says, I know security, don't question me, right? Let's be afraid of that person, right?
Yeah.
So we went out, we got the GDPR, we got the ISO, we got the SOC, and we got the HIPAA. But then one of the most crucial partnerships that I wanted to drive for, and we've completed, and I announced it, I believe this month, that my timeline's kind of blurry anymore, but we announced our partnership with ThreatLocker. And the reason why we did that, and the reason why we think that is a critical partnership, is because we want our clients to know that there's somebody else out there, not us, checking our product, ensuring that we're doing what we're saying we're doing. And that's the reason why the ThreatLocker was so critical. So when we talk about security, there is not an instance that we don't take that serious. Also, we keep in mind that, we come from an MSP, a very large MSP, so they have all their security compliances. So that's something that is crucial to this market. Be afraid of anyone that says, I know security, and isn't getting themselves checked by someone that is not beholden to them. So
Yeah.
that's where we're
That
at with our
includes your
security.
MSP.
Right? Yeah, people talk security. I'm like, oh, you want security? Here you go. Wham! There's our security.
Here's the huge couple of yellow books that we got here for you.
Yeah, it's crazy because people are like, oh, what about NIST? And then we just pull out the GDPR or the SOC, and it's like, yeah, it may not say NIST, but here's all the ticky marks of NIST. Here's the ticky marks of GDPR, ISO, and SOC. We obviously cover that, right?
Right. You have all those controls. You have those checks. Yeah. No, absolutely.
So
yeah.
So it's that kind of relationship where we think security is you can't have a product for someone that has as much access to MSPs have access to their clients, because we are the backbone of business, period. End of story. We are the backbone. But you can't provide a solution that puts them in jeopardy. Now, I heard someone the other day say that MSPs make you hack proof or breach proof or whatever the deal is, right? We all know that is just a not statement. That is not a good statement. What MSPs do is they help companies hedge their bet against those things. They put in multiple layers of security in order to do that. So as a vendor putting forward a product, I have to make sure that those MSPs are as safe as they can be when they're using my products. And that's the reason why we don't do the open ports and we have all the APIs, because that's the next level of integration from a security perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think, one quick thing we'll toss over final thoughts is, my director of IT ops always says that, our job is not to protect our clients. Our job is to make our clients as defensible as possible. We mitigate the risk so that we can allow them to be as defensible as possible so that they are not negligent to their client base. And so I think that's just those three key words of mitigate, defensible, and neglect just really hit home on no matter where you are on the spectrum of service, whether you're the servicer, whether you're the end client, et cetera. So I think that's a great statement that you've mentioned, Tim, is that the fact of, someone saying, hey, you're going to be dollars to donuts, secure to end and not worry about a thing, which is not true in this case, right? It's going to happen. How do we help mitigate that risk as much as possible? So, Rick, tossing right over to you for final thoughts before we kind of round out the show. Anything you wanted to bring up, chat with Tim before we kind of sign off on the show?
Well, no, I'm listening and I'm impressed with what Pia does. And I think about it, if you're particularly, it doesn't matter. I think sometimes people think I have to be a certain size to do something like this, but I can see benefits to what Pia offers for smaller MSPs, for single man MSPs. Like you're saying, if you have a wife or husband or whoever that sits in the tractor or sits in the hairdryer, wherever they do, and they could do this. So, that in itself, again, we always look for ways to improve our business and improve our processes so that, we can improve our service to our customers. And, this seems like one of those options for it. So, Tim, I do want to thank you for your time today. Thank you for stopping in. As always, you're an entertaining guy. We love to hear you talk. And so, thanks so much for that. And for everyone else, we will have in the show notes some links to the demo site, and to all of Pia's sites, so you can check out if you'd like.
Awesome, Tim. Any lasting thoughts before, or anything that we haven't covered about Pia that you'd like to share before we round off the show?
I think the last thoughts I would have is I want to help everybody understand when we're talking about automation. Think about what you're talking about. Think about the way that it happens. Automation should be the reduction of labor, right? You're doing something to make something more efficient, right? If you're shifting your labor, that's not automation, right? So when you're looking for automation solutions, there's a couple out there, right? QuickPass, Jimmy Hatzell of QuickPass, they have a couple of great automations going on, right? Nobody's used them because they don't realize it, but ScalePad has had automations for a few years, right? Like they can help automatically buy those licenses and keep your clients up to date. Now, as an MSP, we're always a little shoddy when someone's just going to automatically buy something on our behalf, right? But as we go into this next year, we're going to start seeing more and more automations. Keep in mind, the automation should be there to relieve you of labor, to relieve you of workload. It should be there to provide you a holistic solution. So when you're really looking at automation, right, true automation, make sure you're looking at what does it cost me to maintain the solution while I have it, right? So there's some stuff out there, right? Chat GPT, that's kind of become a security thing, right?
Yeah.
We talk about, we in PSAs, we've created manual automations for years using workflows.
Right.
We're going to see more and more automations. Understand when you go into that conversation, when you're looking at AI and machine learning, that you understand the entire scope. And am I getting a full solution, or am I getting something that I personally have to manage? We're here to help each other. I threw my LinkedIn up there as well. I'm always happy to have a conversation. Paco, you know that. Rick, you know that. But it's like, we can have a conversation on anything you want, but we're here to help. That's what we're supposed to be doing. And as always, Paco and Rick, it's an honor. Thank you so much for allowing me to come on your show and having a good conversation. It was definitely a great way to break up the day and just catch up with some friends.
No, absolutely. So, for those to check out, head over to PIA.ai, book a demo. We'll make sure to have all those show notes, have those links that Tim shared in the show notes. Tim mentioned LinkedIn is going to be the best way to go ahead and get a hold of him. Tim, as always, is always good to catch up with you, my friend. Missed you at TechCon when we had, hopefully we were hoping to have you there. I was looking forward to have a beer with you, but hopefully we'll get you, I'll see you on the road here coming up shortly, and we'll grab that necessary beer and shoot the stuff, as it were. So appreciate you, my friend, taking out the time. Always a pleasure for you just coming on and sharing your knowledge. Appreciate the value.
Yes.
All right, perfect. And for those that are tuning in, thank you so much for tuning in. Tune in every Tuesday and Thursday. Watch the video podcast on youtube.com/MSP Unplugged. Like, subscribe, hit the notification button so you will never miss a new episode, because Rick is making sure that those are going to be on consistently with great quality. And those image arts are starting to look real nice. But you can also go ahead and take us on the go. If you're looking for the audio version, we're on all of your favorite podcatchers. We're on Amazon Music, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Once again, we really greatly appreciate you tuning in, and we will see you next time on MSP Unplugged.